Just a couple of hours ago, the Israeli occupation forces claimed the life of 27 Palestinians in Khan Yunis city, southern Gaza Strip. These are the areas that the Israeli occupation forces claim they are safe. Now the Israeli occupation are still committing more massacres and genocides against the Palestinian civilians who mostly evacuated from the northern Bar and Gaza City to those areas. So we are in front of a continuous pogrom committed left, right, and center against the Palestinian civilians.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, Moti Ibrahim, for joining us from Gaza and getting us the details of what is in fact unfolding there this morning.
And in the latest from the Israel-Hamas war, the offensive continues to pick up as Israel makes inroads into the Gazan enclave, and civilian casualties continue to ramp up with each passing day. As for the latest reports, Israel, the United States of America and Hamas are now working on an agreement that would free dozens of women and children held hostage in Gaza. The hostage deal will be in exchange for a 5-day pause in fighting. The release, which could begin within the next several days, could lead to the first sustained pause in the ongoing war in Gaza. Well, the World Health Organization led an assessment mission to the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City and determined that it was a death zone. Now, the WHO has urged for a full hospital evacuation. As per UN's figures, 291 patients and 25 health workers remain inside the hospital. The Hamas-run health ministry says that more than 80 people were killed in 2 different Israeli strikes on the Jabalia refugee camp. One of the strikes targeted a UN school turned shelter, resulting in at least 50 deaths. A separate strike on another building killed 32 people from the same family, 19 of them children. While the IDF has not commented on the strikes, but said that its troops were expanding operations in Gaza, including in parts of Jabalia. The Israeli airstrikes battered the South Gazan city of Khan Yunis as well and killed dozens of Palestinians. Over the last night, 26 Palestinians were killed and 23 wounded by an airstrike on 2 apartments. The strike occurred in a multi-story block in a busy residential district there, and a third Israeli airstrike killed 15 Palestinians in a house west of Khan Yunis. Now, as the IDF moves southward in Gaza, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he has clearly defended Israel's military actions and said that Israel abides by the law of war. Take a listen.
ישראל פועלת לפי דיני המלחמה. ככה עובד הצבא שלנו, הצבא המוסרי ביותר בעולם. הסיוע ההומניטרי חיוני גם להמשך הבטחת התמיכה הבינלאומית. בלי סיוע הומניטרי, גם הידידים הטובים ביותר שלנו יתקשו לתמוך בנו לאורך זמן. ויהיה לנו קשה מאוד להמשיך במלחמה עד הסוף.
Meanwhile, Israeli forces continue to operate in the Al-Shifa hospital. Israel's chief military spokesperson said that special forces are now operating in a shaft at the hospital there and are locating weapons and command and control rooms operated by the militant group Hamas.
הכוחות ממשיכים לפעול בבית החולים ב4 מאמצים מרכזיים. 1. איתור ומידע על החטופים, שזה מאמץ עליון. 2. איתור אמצעי לחימה וחדרי פיקוד ושליטה. 3. איתור מחבלים שנמצאים במרחב בתי החולים. 4. מאמץ משמעותי לחשיפת התת קרקע שמתחת לבית החולים והשמדתה.
People continue to seek refuge in south of Gaza after patients, medical staff and civilians left the Al-Shifa hospital. People passed by on donkey carts and on foot looking for refuge and safety in Gaza. And amidst the intensifying Israeli offensive, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas made a direct appeal to U.S. President Joe Biden to put pressure on Israel to stop its operation in the Gaza Strip.
اليوم أتوجه للرئيس الأمريكي جو بايدن الذي يتحمل دون غيره مسؤولية خاصة لما له من مكانة دولية
And in an opinion article in the Washington Post, U.S. President Joe Biden said that the Palestinian Authority should ultimately govern the Gaza Strip and the West Bank following the Israel-Hamas war, while Biden rallied behind a revitalized Palestinian Authority and also a two-state solution. Jordan's foreign minister voiced doubt that Israel could reach its goal of eliminating Hamas completely with its heavy bombing and invasion of the Gaza Strip. Ayman Safadi said this at the annual Asas Manama Dialogue Security Conference in Bahrain. And to help us understand more about the Gaza crisis, we are now being joined by Alan Boothstein, who is an assistant professor at the Department of Political Science, University of California. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, Mr. Boothstein. Right, Mr. Boothstein, in the latest, there is a deal in the works between Israel, Hamas and the United States of America, which would free dozens of women and children held hostage in Gaza in exchange for a 5-day pause in fighting. The White House has clearly said that there is no deal yet and that they're working towards it. How optimistic are you regarding this? Because we've seen in past as well that there have been talks regarding ceasefire and hostage release, but none of it has seen the light of the day.
I'm really relatively optimistic that there will be a deal in the coming days. I cannot speak to what exactly the nuances of the deal will be because it's changing all the time. All the parties, Israel, Hamas, the United States, and Qatar, all have an interest in getting a deal as quickly as possible right now. Israel needs to secure the release of its hostages, both politically, so that the government shows that it is achieving its goals, and because that is one of its aims in the war. Hamas really needs this pause in order to breathe and possibly to release some Palestinian prisoners. The United States wants to secure a pause and see the release of its own citizens, and Qatar wants to show that it is actually fulfilling its promise and managing to secure the release of some hostages. So everyone has an interest. The actual fine-tuning of the deal is probably still going to take a few days because Israel is very, very nervous about this idea that Hamas is going to release only several prisoners each day, because that way they can prolong the pause as much as possible. Oh, there was a mistake today, they couldn't release people, so they need another day of pause. So Israel's very nervous about that. So that may take a few more days, but I'm relatively optimistic that there will be a deal at some point.
Mr. Boothstein, apart from the talks on hostage release, there's also a lot of confusion and chaos in Gaza. Palestinian officials say that 2 explosions have killed dozens of civilians in Jabalia refugee camp, while the WHO has declared Al-Shifa hospital as a death zone, urging immediate evacuation. Not only this, there are also leaflets being dropped to evacuate people from Khan Yunis. The pertinent and also a very important question being, where do Gazans go now?
So the IDF so far called on the evacuation of Palestinians from the northern part of the Gaza Strip. That was 1.1 million people out of 2.2 million in the Gaza Strip to move south. And exactly as you state, now they're starting to suggest that they start moving southward. The Minister of Defense in Israel, Yoav Gallant, today specifically said that we're taking care of Gaza City and then we are going to move south, which means that the IDF is planning this already. It's increased its attacks in Deir el-Balach, in Khan Yunis, and is calling people to evacuate. There is, theoretically, a secure safe zone in the eastern part of the southern part of the Gaza Strip, an area called the Muasi, near Rafah, but it certainly cannot hold 2 million people. So it's unclear to me also what the exact plan is in terms of the IDF, if there's a plan to allow safe passage for people to move back to the north after the IDF starts going down south. Right now, the call is just for 3 specific neighborhoods in Khan Yunis, so it is technically possible. But in practicality, I'm not sure what the IDF's plan is because they certainly can't move 2 million people to one small area in the eastern part of Rafah.
Last question to Mr. Boothstein. What is your assessment of the latest statement by U.S. President Joe Biden, where he outlined how the Palestinian Authority should ultimately govern the Gaza Strip and the West Bank following the Israel-Hamas war?
I think there's growing impatience in the United States with the fact that Israel clearly does not have a plan for what is going to happen after it wins this war, as according to its plan, and destroys Hamas. In Israel, there's voices from the far extreme right saying that Palestinians would be expelled and that Israel would reestablish settlements. There's voices from Netanyahu saying that Israel is not going to reestablish settlements, but is going to have complete security control. There's voices from the opposition that are saying the Palestinian Authority should be restored. The United States is losing its patience because it is trying to protect Israel internationally and diplomatically, but as it becomes clear that Israel actually doesn't have a plan and isn't clear what's going to be the future, the United States is starting to dictate its own terms. It's starting to say, you know what, the future is going to be the Palestinian Authority, and if you have a problem with that, then you can't expect us to defend you diplomatically anymore. I think that's where the winds are blowing.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Burstein, for joining us and sharing insights with us on the story.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
This broadcast with some breaking inputs that have just come in the last few minutes. This is what the health ministry in the Gaza Strip has said, that there's been yet another attack by the Israelis, and this time it targeted a United Nations-run school that has been bombed by the Israeli forces. And according to the latest draft that is coming in, at least about 50 Palestinian civilians, including many children, reportedly have been massacred inside the premises of this United Nations-run school. Now, the strike is said to have been on the United Nations-run Al-Fakhura school in the Jabalia refugee camp. Thousands of people had in fact taken refuge inside of this United Nations Al-Fakhura school in the Jabalia refugee camp because their homes had already been destroyed. These unsuspecting Palestinian civilians inside the United Nations-run school were hit with an Israeli bomb in just the last few minutes. And this, of course, is the latest information that has now come in. The airstrikes on the residential blocks in the southern part of Gaza have also resulted in deaths of at least about 32 other Palestinians. And remember, Israel has been carrying on with its campaign of relentlessly bombing the Gaza Strip, and overnight there were several attacks that were staged on the southern Gazan city of Khan Yunis, where Israel has demanded that all Palestinians should in fact flee from. And according to reports that have come in, 26 people were killed, while 23 others were severely injured in another bomb that was dropped by Israel. And Israel is steadily expanding its ground offensive, and according to reports that have come in, at least about 5 Palestinians were killed and several others were wounded in West Bank in a drone strike. Now, the Israeli army raids have been targeting the Palestinians ever since this bout of violence broke out on the 7th of October. Now, the Hamas-run health ministry has said that at least about 120 people who were wounded are still at the facility, along with an unspecified number of premature babies, adding that it is in touch with the Red Cross and the Red Crescent about the infants at the Al-Shifa hospital, from where there is again an exodus taking place. The tensions are on the rise along the Lebanese-Israel border as well, where the Iran-backed Hezbollah group and Israel have traded rocket and missile fire. Hezbollah has said that it has shot down an Israeli drone near the border, and Israel's military says that it has intercepted a missile that was fired at an Israeli drone. Meanwhile, a first batch of fuel entered into the Gaza Strip from Egypt under an Israel-US deal, where about 17,000 litres of fuel for telecommunications has now passed through the Rafah border crossing in a bid to try and end the communications blackout that has halted 8 convoys for well over 2 days. Now, with the worries of children's safety in Gaza mounting, the first plane carrying about 15 people from the Gaza Strip, including children and their families, arrived in the United Arab Emirates. The flight is part of the UAE President's initiative to provide some medical assistance for about 1,000 children from the Gaza Strip. Separately, talks around the war continue in Israel. The Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has hosted his French counterpart in Tel Aviv, and the two discussed humanitarian issues of the hostages held by Hamas. The duo also shared operational achievements and developments on the ground. Meanwhile, the American President Joe Biden has again pressed for the immediate release of hostages during talks with the Qatari leadership. The Bahrain's Crown Prince has called for a hostage exchange between Hamas and Israel in order to achieve a breakthrough in the hostilities. The Prince has unequivocally condemned the 7th of October attack and the Israeli air campaign of relentlessly bombing the Gaza Strip that has followed ever since then. Meanwhile, in Israel, families of those who are presently held hostage marched on the highway demanding for accountability from their prime minister, who they say has done precious little in trying to secure the release of hostages who are presently in the custody of Hamas. Now, this is a 5-day-long march which is ending today. It started from Tel Aviv, where they're calling on the Israeli government to secure the release of an estimated 240 Israeli hostages. The protesters are walking towards the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office. They're asking him to hasten the process of securing the release of the hostages. All right, now to give us insights in terms of what is happening at this moment within the Gaza Strip, we're being joined by Mottia Ibrahim, who is a Palestinian journalist who is based out of the central area of the Gaza Strip. Now, Mottia Ibrahim, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. Now, we are hearing reports that people are still fleeing from the Al-Shifa hospital. This even after Israel came forth with a clarification, denying reports that it had given an ultimatum to everyone within the Al-Shifa hospital to in fact leave from there. What are you picking up from the ground?
Yes, first of all, thank you for having me. Actually, the situation as you are following is catastrophic at all levels. As you have mentioned, that the Israeli occupation forces forcibly expelled the Palestinian people, including the Palestinian evacuees who were taking Shifa Hospital as the shelter, in addition to the Palestinian patients and injured people inside Shifa. They were totally expelled under the demands of the Israeli occupation forces. We are talking about about 5,000 Palestinians have been evacuated and forcibly expelled out of the Shifa hospital complex. In addition to that, those numbers actually, including 500 Palestinian patients and Palestinian wounded people, they were totally unable to move or to walk on their legs out of the complex, but the Israeli occupation threatened them to shoot them dead. So they found themselves obliged and imposed to leave the Shifa under those threats and under those demands. In addition to that, there are hundreds of the Palestinian patients and injured people are still located inside the Shifa complex, as they are not able completely to move a step on the ground. In addition to that, we have multiple premature babies are still inside the incubators, in addition to the patients of the IC units. So, apparently we are in front of another war crime committed by the Israeli occupation.
Absolutely, indeed. And also, Mottia, tell us a bit about what the situation is in the place where you are at this moment. You're in fact in front of the Al-Aqsa hospital. What is the situation like out there, and how badly have the medical facilities in the Gaza been hit?
Yes, regarding the situation here in the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, it is getting worse and worse with every moment passing, actually, because as you know that the Israeli warcrafts maintain their attacks and their incursions on several areas across Gaza, particularly the central area. Literally, the last night was bloody for the Palestinian people. It was tough as the Israeli occupation over the night maintained the airstrikes against the residential buildings and the civilian houses, not only in the central area of Gaza Strip. In the northern part of Gaza Strip, the Israeli occupation forces committed a massacre by killing more than 65 Palestinians, mostly women and children, and they were brought to the Indonesian hospital. And in Gaza City, inside Gaza City, we are talking about more 40 Palestinians have been reported killed after the Israeli tanks surrounding their buildings and claimed their lives. In the central area of Gaza Strip, we are talking about more 6 Palestinians were killed by the Israeli occupation forces after the Israeli warcrafts targeted a residential building in the central area in Deir al-Balah city. just a couple of hours ago, the Israeli occupation forces claimed the life of 27 Palestinians in Khan Yunis city, southern Gaza Strip. These are the areas that the Israeli occupation forces claim they are safe. Now the Israeli occupation are still committing more massacres and genocides against the Palestinian civilians who are mostly evacuated from the northern Bar and Gaza City to those areas. So we are in front of a continuous pogrom committed left, right, and center against the Palestinian civilians.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, Moti Ibrahim, for joining us from Gaza and getting us the details of what is in fact unfolding there at this moment. And also on this broadcast, we're now being joined by Mr. Edward P. Joseph. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. in the United States. He's a conflict management expert and also a foreign policy lecturer and an analyst. Now, Mr. Joseph, we've been witnessing what's been happening in the last 24, 48 hours. And, the Al-Shifa hospital, the biggest medical center in the Gaza Strip, has been at the center of what's in fact been unfolding there. Now, for the last fortnight, we've been hearing from the Israeli Defense Forces that